The second piece that's been assigned to everyone in this unit is more of an editorial than a kind of philosophical argument. However, I think that the authors present some important ideas and touch on some important concepts that I think are a good fit for the rest of this unit. One thing I just want to note is that this is written for a publication called Reflections, which is affiliated with Yale's Divinity School. So it's written from a Christian perspective. Just know that going into it. One of the important ideas that the authors present in this piece is that often environmental ethics is done from a mountaintop perspective. What does this mean? It's that it's often done from a looking out at a high level and not really being down in the weeds. So you might think here about how a lot of the theories that we've read have been very kind of idealized and high level. They haven't had a lot of practical information for things that we actually experience, environmental conditions as they actually are. So the authors argue that if we want to actually have a liberating environmental ethic, by which they mean one that sustains life and is concerned with the environment and the health and well-being of living things, including humans, it has to be in touch with the gritty and hard reality of problems and horrific conditions that certain people live in. They write about how we have to come down from the mountain and construct this environmental ethic, this struggle from the misery below. And they present in this piece a really powerful picture of them being in Central America and seeing the beautiful green mountaintops from the heart of the city, which is full of poverty and misery and problems, right? They argue that the rise of ecology in science and public consciousness has helped to create a system of ethics. Ecology is the study of the relationship between living organisms and their habitat that focuses on the complex interactions and interdependencies of systems that sustain diverse forms of life. This emphasis on interrelations, interdependence has encouraged the generation of new ideas, hierarchies of value, and customs that reflect a strong respect for the environment. They're tracing something they take to be happening. They say that since the United Nations Earth Summit in 1992, a new vision of the relationship of humanity and the environment has emerged. The old view of domination and exploitation has been tempered by our coming to understand ecological limits and the negative effects of industrial societies and the excesses of markets. Basically, they're talking about how we've come to understand that the extreme expansion of industry, consumption, and technology have had negative effects. They've had some things that we didn't expect to happen that have had environmental consequences. Things like pollution, mass species extinction, and climate change. And also how these negative effects and a pursuit of unlimited economic growth are potentially incompatible with maintaining the environment and not pushing it past its ecological limits. It may be the case that industrialization, consumption, these kinds of things, and this pursuit of unlimited economic growth are just not compatible with some sort of understanding of environmental sustainability, because it's going to mean that we have to force the environment past its ecological limit. And once we're past the ecological limit, there's just really no way to come back from that. This shift has partly been represented by the adoption of sustainable development as the principle that must govern economic activity. So we might think about here things like the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable development, which we've talked about in the previous unit, focuses on both social and ecological responsibility, trying to find a good balance between current human needs and limited natural resources so that future generations can meet their own needs. The authors argue that two strong parts of what will be needed to try to meet these goals are participatory democracy and social justice. I'm not going to talk much about this because we've already talked about it a little bit, but participatory democracy is this idea of the right of the people that are affected by a problem to participate in addressing it. The idea is that when things affect us, we should have a right to participate in the decisions that are being made about them. In the last section of this piece, the authors address some of the things that they believe are needed to happen, that need to happen or be done in order to address the environmental crisis. First, they argue that we need to embrace a global citizenship that is environmentally conscious, strengthens the links between environmental ethics, human rights, and fights against poverty and the inculcation of values of brotherhood in society. We've talked a little bit about global citizenship. One of the videos that are assigned from this unit really goes into this in more detail, but they're laying out here a view of global citizenship that they think is going to be really necessary for addressing environmental problems going forward. Functionally, global citizenship tries to motivate duties and responsibilities outside of the limits of the nation state. It seeks to give us an understanding of what we ought to do as members of the planet as a whole. They argue that we ought to adopt a community ethic which values collaboration, participation, and solidarity. And then to end, they write, we must all learn to share the same sun, the same earth, the same life. This concerns the rational use of natural resources, which requires more moderate, sustainable lifestyles. The idea here is that if we adopt global citizenship, then we no longer are limited to understanding our rights and our responsibilities in the context of the nation that we live in, but more broadly as citizens of one planet that share the planet and its resources and have responsibilities to the people and the other species that we share it with.